Yeah, we're pivoting, my boss said, like that word could explain everything. Mark didn't even look at me when he said it, just stared at the branded notebook in front of him like it might jump in to help. We were in one of the smaller conference rooms, the kind we used for pitch warm-ups or HR warnings. The door was shut, blinds drawn. That told me everything before he even opened his mouth. 15 years, gone in a sentence and a shrug. We've implemented an AI content solution that streamlines strategy and execution, he said, reciting lines I was sure someone in a suit had written for him. It's faster, cheaper, scalable. You know how the market's shifting. I didn't respond. I just waited. It's not performance-based, he added quickly. Your work has always been solid. It's just a shift. A shift. That's what he called gutting the department I'd built from the ground up and replacing it with a language model and a licensing fee. A shift. I nodded once, the kind of nod you give when you're not agreeing, just acknowledging gravity. He exhaled like that made it easier. You'll get the standard severance. HR will reach out. I stood. He stayed seated, which felt about right. My desk was already half-packed. I'd always kept it minimalist. One photo of my daughter, a plant that had somehow survived 6 years of fluorescent lighting, and a coffee mug from the agency's first Cannes shortlisting. As I walked past the team, no one looked up. Maybe they didn't know yet. Maybe they did and didn't know what to say. Either way, the silence was louder than anything Mark had said in that room. At the elevator, I paused. 15 years, dozens of campaigns, millions in revenue, all replaced by a few thousand lines of code trained to imitate human creativity. They didn't fire me for underperforming. They didn't fire me for breaking policy. They fired me because a machine was cheaper. As the elevator doors closed, I checked my watch, not for the time, but because it had been a gift from the agency's founder. The founder who had left 2 years ago, before all the pivots started. By the time I hit the ground floor, I wasn't angry. Not yet, but I was awake. The office looked different when you were walking out with a box in your arms. Not because anything had changed, but because everything had. My name's Nathan Hale. I'm 44. For the last decade and a half, I was the guy who made brands matter. When I joined Graybridge, the agency was half its current size. No social presence, no inbound funnel, just cold calls, cold coffee, and colder Monday mornings. I took us from that to trend reports in Adweek, keynote slots at major conferences, and a portfolio that made clients chase us instead of the other way around. I built the content division from scratch, hired junior strategists, trained them up, watched them grow into leaders. I designed the campaign frameworks we used in every client pitch. I was the last one to leave during launches and the first one in when something broke. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, a couple vacations I'd promised my daughter. I told myself it was all part of the job, sacrifice in the name of something bigger. But loyalty only moves one way in this industry. Up, not down. I made it to my car without anyone stopping me. 15 years, and I walked out without so much as a thank you from leadership. Not even a hallway handshake. I slid the box onto the passenger seat and sat for a minute, staring at the windshield. It was raining, but I hadn't noticed until that moment. The world goes on like nothing happened, because for the world, nothing did. The truth is, I knew something like this was coming. I saw the signs months ago. Fewer invites to high-level strategy meetings, sudden fascination with automated intelligence, and one too many articles left open on Mark's screen about reducing overhead. Still, knowing doesn't soften the landing. At home, I left the box on the table and opened my laptop, not to update my resume, not yet. I pulled up our latest campaign, the one the AI was supposed to replace me on. I read the copy. It was technically sound. Grammar, structure, call to action, all intact. But it had no soul. And that's when I realized they hadn't just fired me. They'd gutted the voice they didn't even know they depended on. They'd learn that soon enough. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for clarity. The HR office smelled like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. No one ever noticed until they were in here for the wrong reasons. A woman named Kara sat across from me, reading from a folder that might as well have been laminated in bureaucracy. Her voice was soft, practiced. She'd done this before. You'll receive 4-month severance, continuation of benefits through the quarter, and a 12-month non-compete clause, she said, sliding a branded envelope across the table. We've also included access to an outplacement firm, resume support, career counseling. I nodded once, the kind of nod people give when they've stopped listening. She smiled, tight, apologetic, and added, "It's not personal, Nathan." That line again. They always say that right before they erase you. I took the pen and signed where she indicated. No questions, no comments. Just a neat signature beside the typed name I'd used to build an entire division. She offered a pamphlet. I didn't take it. Outside her office, no one made eye contact. HR had a special hallway at Graybridge. Far from the creatives, the pitch teams, the energy, felt like a place people went to vanish. Back at my desk, I pulled the last drawer open. There wasn't much. I'd kept my space clean, efficient, digital. But at the very back was a small black external hard drive I'd always kept on hand. A backup of my own systems. Campaign wireframes, pitch decks, draft taglines, positioning exercises. Nothing confidential, nothing illegal. Just the work behind the work. I slipped it into my coat pocket and zipped up, nodding once to the intern who glanced up as I passed. He looked nervous, probably worried he was next. Probably right. In the elevator, I watched the numbers descend like a countdown. 10, 9, 8. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a lobby that suddenly felt smaller, less important. They had made their choice. They thought the future was faster, cheaper, automated. Let them find out what the future sounds like without someone to guide the voice. Outside, I felt the cold hit my face. It wasn't personal, but it was done. And now, it was my turn. My apartment was quiet. Not in a peaceful way. In a sterile, end-of-something way. I set the coat on the chair, placed the hard drive on my desk like it was made of glass, and booted up my personal laptop. No agency login screens, no Slack pings, just me, the hum of the fan, and 15 years of muscle memory. The drive clicked once, then mounted. Folders unfolded like layers of an old life. 2012 pitch templates, persona matrices, voice development toolkit version 3, brand tone calibration. I clicked into a folder marked rejected, not because it was bitter, but because that's what they'd been. Campaigns I'd built that never saw the light. Brilliant, nuanced, too bold for clients who preferred safe. I never deleted them. Some part of me always knew they might matter again. Then I opened a browser. I typed the name of the AI platform they'd replaced me with. Content Nova, flashy homepage, tagline in bold, Human-grade creativity, machine speed. I created a free trial account using a burner email. It let me test a sample campaign. I selected retail, chose warm professional for tone, clicked a few boxes. The generated copy slid onto the screen in seconds. I read it once, then again. No mistakes. Clean structure. Even some charm. But it was familiar. The phrasing, the CTA structure, the segment-specific voice modeling. It wasn't just inspired by human strategy. It was mine. My frameworks, my formatting. The adaptive tone protocol I'd developed 5 years ago. The thing Mark called a little too granular in a feedback session. I recognized the shape of every sentence the way a craftsman recognizes his own tools in someone else's hand. Only this wasn't someone. It was a machine. I dug deeper, scanned their white paper, found a footnote referencing a former agency partner. Graybridge. So that's how they'd done it. Fed the system with internal assets, internal training materials. My materials. They hadn't just fired me. They'd uploaded me. I sat back in my chair, the screen glowing, and I smiled for the first time that day. They thought they'd replaced me. They'd only duplicated the surface. Now it was time to show them what they couldn't automate. I didn't announce it. No website, no launch party, no self-congratulatory LinkedIn post with a headshot and an inspirational quote. I just filed the paperwork for an LLC, rerouted my personal email, and bought a domain name I didn't plan to advertise. Hale and Company, not a real agency, not yet. Just a name with enough ambiguity to suggest something larger. I was the and company. I set up a basic client intake system, pulled together a clean set of case studies, none proprietary, all results focused. Then I started sending quiet emails to past clients. Not the ones Graybridge had assigned me, the ones I had built. The ones who still reached out with holiday cards or personal notes when campaigns hit big. The subject lines were simple. Still in the game, or in case you're still looking for the good stuff. Not everyone responded. Some were too loyal, some were too nervous, but a few did. I heard what happened, one wrote. Would love to chat. Things haven't been the same without your fingerprints on the work. The calls were low-key, no sales pitch, just listening. You always got our tone right, a client told me from Denver. Everything coming out now feels mechanical. Another from a nonprofit in Boston said, your replacement doesn't ask questions, just spits things out. There's no why anymore. I didn't promise big wins. I didn't undercut Graybridge. I just offered clarity. One client asked if I had a team. I said no. Not yet. But I still work fast. What I didn't say was, when you've done this long enough, your brain becomes the brief. By the end of the second week, I had 3 signed retainers, quiet, monthly contracts, small brands, but meaningful work. And every word I wrote had weight again. No dashboards, no prompt tweaking, just real stories, real strategy, real voice. I wasn't trying to be loud. I was trying to be undeniable. And apparently, that was enough. The first sign came in a forwarded screenshot from a client I hadn't heard from in months. Subject line, are you still working with Graybridge? Body. We're getting inconsistent tone, and our last email campaign had a 14% unsubscribe rate. I stared at it for a moment, then checked the calendar. They'd replaced me 6 weeks ago. By week 7, the cracks were showing. A junior strategist, one I'd mentored, messaged me on Signal. That was unusual. We hadn't spoken since I left. "Hey, off record. The new system's copy is weird. Feels like it's pretending to care." I asked what that meant. "It's like reading someone who knows what empathy sounds like but has never actually felt it." That made sense. I can replicate language. It can even mimic emotion. But mimicry isn't memory. It doesn't know what it's like to craft a tone after hearing a founder cry about their product launch, or write a homepage after 3 rounds of late-night pivot calls. It doesn't know nuance. It knows patterns, and patterns don't convert. I started hearing more. A creative director I used to collaborate with called from a burner number. "They won't say it out loud, but internal morale's tanking," she said. "We're generating faster, but everything's beige." Beige, exactly what happens when you remove the friction, the imperfection, the humanity. Mark hadn't just installed an AI, he'd neutered the voice of the agency, made it efficient and empty. I didn't respond to the rumors. I didn't poke the wound. I just watched. And I kept writing. My campaigns didn't go viral. They didn't trend. But they performed. They resonated. One client forwarded their Q1 report. 36% uptick in engagement. Small audience. High conversion. "You still got it," she wrote. I never lost it. They just stopped knowing where to look. The call came on a Thursday, mid-morning. I was deep into a brand voice audit for a nonprofit that worked with veterans. Real people, real stakes. No room for buzzwords or optimizations. Just truth, delivered clearly. My phone buzzed. Mark S. Graybridge. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey Nathan," he said, trying to sound breezy. "Hope you're well." That alone told me everything I needed to know. "I was just digging through some of your old decks," he continued, "wondering if you still had the framework you used on the Apex account. You know, the segmentation tone ladder thing?" I sat back, let the silence hang for a beat. "That wasn't a framework," I said. "That was intuition." He laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. Right, just, things are moving fast here. Trying to realign voice on a few accounts. You replaced me with something scalable, remember?" A pause. Then, "Yeah, look, that wasn't personal." "It never is," I said, and hung up. I sat there for a second, staring at the waveform of my last recorded session. I didn't feel victorious, just validated. They were starting to realize what they'd lost, and more importantly, why. It wasn't the deliverables. It was the calibration, the trust, the ability to feel the shape of a brand before it ever reached an audience. You can't code that. You live it, or you don't. My office was a 1-bedroom apartment with a desk in the corner and a view of the alley. It didn't matter. Clients weren't hiring me for the skyline. They were hiring me because their stories were falling flat, and no one in their new AI-powered workflows could tell them why. The first wave of calls came from startups. Founders with vision but no voice. Then came the nonprofits. Organizations burned by templated campaigns that sounded like sales emails. Then the legacy brands. The ones too proud to admit publicly that their conversions were dropping and their audience was shrinking, but desperate enough to ask quietly for help. I charged modestly at first, just enough to keep the lights on and the pressure low. But I gave them everything. custom voice maps, modular copy built for real humans, not just clicks, content that actually felt something and made the audience feel it too. It wasn't just strategy. It was listening, interpreting, translating a mission into meaning. Every win got me another intro, another quiet recommendation. I never ran ads, never posted testimonials. I didn't need to. People talk when they feel seen. They talk louder when they feel understood. Graybridge still had the headlines, but I had the results. And behind the scenes, the clients they thought were locked in were quietly sliding out. Not because I was trying to take them, because I never stopped treating them like people. By the end of the quarter, I had 6 clients on monthly retainers, 2 more in negotiations, and a waitlist building faster than I could clear it. No logo wall, no slogan, just this. One guy, one voice, and no algorithms in the middle. Turns out that was enough. The headline broke around 7:12 a.m. Global brand pulls campaign after cultural misstep. Graybridge Communications silent amid backlash. I was pouring coffee when the notification hit my phone. The logo was familiar. Too familiar. They were one of Graybridge's crown jewels. High 6-figure retainer, annual gala invites, handshake photos with the executive team posted every quarter 4. I clicked through to the article. It wasn't just a misstep. It was a full-body lurch into PR disaster. An AI-generated ad that mixed languages in a way that insulted a core demographic overseas. Something that never would have made it past a human who understood the culture or cared to ask. But the machine didn't pause. It just processed. And Mark's team trusted it blindly. By noon, the campaign had been pulled. The client had issued a public statement, and Graybridge's site quietly removed the case study they just launched last week. The screenshots were already everywhere. Backlash moved faster than any content sprint. I sat by the window with my coffee, phone in hand, watching the news updates roll in. My inbox had 3 new inquiries by the time I finished the second cup, all from companies looking to rebuild trust. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, but I didn't look away either. Some lessons are too expensive to ignore, and some are just delayed payments on arrogance. This wasn't the end of Graybridge, but it was the end of the illusion. They'd promised clients AI would be cheaper, faster, cleaner, but they'd never stopped to ask, cleaner than what? The call came that night. Same number, same name, different tone. "Hey Nathan," Mark said. No small talk, no casual bravado this time. Just wait. We need to talk. I said nothing. He filled the silence. "I'll be honest, things are rough. We lost Hestera today, and a few others are reconsidering. The AI thing, it's not doing what we hoped." I let him keep going. He sounded tired. "We need you to consult, just temporarily. Voice recalibration, crisis messaging. We can pay more than before. You'd have control." He was trying to sell me back the keys to the house he burned down. I waited, then said, "You replaced me with a tool." Long pause. "You didn't realize," I continued. "I was the toolbox." There was a beat of silence. Just him, breathing on the other end, processing the echo of that line. "We're trying to fix it," he said. "I already did," I replied, and hung up. I didn't need their money. I already had their clients. The official offer came 2 days later. Branded envelope, hand-delivered. Like they thought presentation might tip the scale. Inside, a contract. Consulting role, 6-month retainer, twice my previous salary, flexible hours, defined autonomy. Mark even added a personal note, handwritten like an afterthought. We should never have let you go. Let's build something better. Together. I read it twice, then once more, slowly. It wasn't a bad offer. In fact, on paper, it was better than anything they'd given me when I was salaried. But it was still them. Still Graybridge. Still the same system trying to reverse engineer humanity through a spreadsheet. I didn't reply. Didn't negotiate. I scanned the document, archived the email, and closed the tab. Instead, I opened a new one, typed the headline carefully, checked it twice. Why I won't replace you unless you let it. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering what marketing used to be before it became synonymous with automation. I wrote about voice. I wrote about empathy. I wrote about the difference between language and connection. I ended with a line I'd carried in my back pocket for years, but never had a reason to use. The smartest tool in the room can't see your audience cry. That's why you're still here. I hit post and walked away. Didn't check it that night. Didn't need to. I'd said what needed saying. Finally. By morning, the post had 9,000 reactions. By lunch, it had 60,000. By dinner, 3 speaking invitations, 2 podcast requests, and 1 panel moderator from Cannes were in my inbox. Mark didn't call. But a junior from Graybridge sent a DM. Just read your post. It's what we've all been too afraid to say out loud. Thank you. I replied with a simple, keep showing up human. The comments poured in. Copywriters, strategists, brand managers, people who'd been quietly shoved to the margins in the rush to optimize, finally had language for what they'd been feeling. I didn't write it to go viral. I wrote it to remind people of their value. Turns out, people were starving for that reminder. By the end of the week, 5 more clients had left Graybridge. 2 signed with me directly. 3 were interested in conversations. I didn't chase, didn't pitch, didn't scale. I listened, I crafted, and I kept showing up. Not as a trend, as a presence. Turns out, that's what AI still can't do, and probably never will. It didn't make front-page news, just a quiet link passed around in Slack threads, group chats, and agency lunch tables. Graybridge Q2 financials leak. Revenue down 43%. Turnover hits record high. No context, no commentary, just numbers. But the numbers said enough. 43% drop in quarterly revenue. 19 full-time staff departures. 9 major client losses, including one that had been with them for over a decade. The AI platform they'd invested in so heavily had promised scale, speed, efficiency, and it had delivered. But it also stripped the soul from the work. Because what no one in the pitch decks ever mentioned was that automation doesn't build relationships. It doesn't ask deeper questions. It doesn't know how to pivot when a client hesitates halfway through a sentence and says, "Actually, can I be honest?" That's not a flaw in the code. It's a flaw in the premise. AI wasn't a replacement. It was a shortcut. And shortcuts don't build trust. They cut corners. They cut costs. Eventually, They just cut people. I didn't repost the leak, didn't quote tweet it. I just bookmarked it and moved on with my day. The clients I'd taken on didn't need convincing. They already knew the difference. And the ones still pretending not to? They'd learn soon enough. The last time Mark called, I let it ring. Then I picked up. No preamble, no spin, just, I messed up. His voice was low, stripped of the usual polish. I waited. You were right, he continued. We got caught chasing the wrong metric. Thought efficiency could replace empathy. It can't. I said nothing. He took a breath. I'm not calling to offer you anything. I needed to say it out loud. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But this wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about pride. It was about the one thing they'd tried to digitize out of the business, and couldn't. No, I said. You didn't mess up by trying something new. You messed up by trying to automate out the one thing you can't replace. Trust. Silence. A long one. Then a quiet, yeah. I hung up. Didn't block him, didn't text back, just didn't answer again. Because some calls don't deserve a second chance, and some lessons are best learned without a safety net. The office was small, 2 rooms above a bookstore that still smelled like paper and ink. No front desk, no reception, just a matte black plaque on the door that read, Hale Collective, Voice, Strategy, Humanity. It wasn't a traditional agency. I didn't want one. Just a space for real work, real people, real problems with answers that couldn't be copy-pasted. We didn't have tiers of approval or 6-person email threads for a tagline. We sat across from each other, asked the right questions, listened longer than we talked. Sometimes the best copy came from silence. I brought on 2 team members, both junior, both sharp. One came from a burned-out in-house content gig. The other was laid off after their startup pivoted to AI-led storytelling. I taught them what no one had taught me when I was starting, that marketing isn't about trends, it's about timing. That brand voice isn't about sounding clever, it's about sounding true. That the job isn't to sell, it's to connect. We worked slow when it mattered, fast when it didn't. Clients noticed. Not because we shouted louder, but because we asked better questions. We didn't chase virality. We chased impact. Sometimes we still used AI-light touch tools for research or iteration. I didn't preach against it. I just kept one rule carved into every briefing session. The machine can suggest, but the human decides. I got speaking invites, published essays, turned down a book deal because I didn't want to become someone else's content engine. I was already building something. Legacy work. Not the kind they name awards after. The kind people remember when everything else stops working. One afternoon, after a campaign debrief, one of my juniors asked, "Do you think AI will ever fully replace us?" I took a beat, thought about everything that had happened. Then I said number because I wasn't anti-AI. I was pro-people, and people remember who showed up when the machines failed. Outside the window, a client walked by and waved. We waved back. Then we got back to work. Quietly. Intentionally. Together. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.